So one thing that's really gotten my goat over the past few years is the reporting on the sewage crisis. And by sewage crisis, I mean our entire country is surrounded by shit, and our rivers are full of shit, which is great. Really happy to live in this island. One island where, out of all of the countries who didn't privatise their water, we decided we'd do that. Not even Pinochet got that far. That's how right-wing we are in terms of water delivery. And it's only gotten us good things. I can't believe the private companies with natural monopolies didn't have to care about investing in the kind of infrastructure necessary, so we didn't waste a load of water through leakages, and also didn't pump literal actual shit into our water. The absolute surreal nadir of the state of the waterways in this country is this clip from Good Morning Britain that has to be seen to be believed.
Very carefully, and you've looked at the data too. What are you finding?
Well, the sewage treatment plant behind us takes in the waste of 500,000 people, and when it can't cope with it, it chucks it straight out here. And in the marine life just beneath our feet, we're actually finding they're full of drugs. They're full of contraceptive pill, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication. Every single marine species that we've looked at so far is full of cocaine.
Which means raw sewage is coming into this water.
Exactly.
The data is telling you what?
Well, we've been looking at the discharges across the whole south coast into the sea from southern waters, stormwater overflows, and they appear to be going off during breakfast periods. So around about now, when people are getting up in the morning, maybe going to the loo, having a shower, setting their washing machines going, that's when it's more likely to go off.
Well, that would certainly suggest that the system is creaking
creaking is a word that you could say. Totally collapsing, a gigantic failure, entirely the fault of the fact that we left in the hands of private companies to do so. Private companies who, throughout this entire period, have been taking on loans to be able to pay out shareholder dividends, essentially using infrastructure as collateral, knowing that because of the fact that we cannot be without water, everybody has to drink water, we can't just not pay for it, that they have an entirely captive market and they have no needs to invest. They don't need to be able to fix any of the problems because they know that they are so critical to the functioning of the country that they can just get away with it. They can just get away with it whatsoever. There's a reason, right? The Michael Burry, the guy who invested in betting against the housing market pre-2008 because he knew about the fact that all of this shit would have blown up in its face because of the fact that we'd left critical things such as housing entirely to the market. The reason why he's investing in water right now, because it's like the most important building block for the entirety of human existence. And of course, the other private companies are scalping us because of it, and they don't need to care about the fact that they are pumping literal actual shit into our rivers, so much so that triathlon swimmers all got sick from swimming in the sea.
The pressure from the communities that surround it, the water companies themselves saying they're going to put a lot more money in to try and fix this issue, but it's us that will have to pay for it. It's certainly an issue right the way around the country. You can see from pictures that sewage discharge is a real problem for many coastal communities and people who live on the rivers, certainly, as Alex has told us, affecting the wildlife. And today the Environment Agency is launching a whistleblowers hotline so that people working in the industry can report their concerns about things that are going wrong, although there are some concerns.
Yeah, as you say as well, Sully, they've literally cancelled people diving into the water during the Oxford boat race because they've detected so much E. coli in the River Thames that it's not safe for them to jump in at the end. That's the Britain that we live in. And it's not just, I can't usually get rightoids on side by talking about like the basic economics, but I know the rightoids love, very specifically, like national heritage, and the Oxford-Cambridge boat race may be full of a bunch of posh twats that I couldn't really care about, but it is at least, a kind of national tradition. And it now can't happen because the River Thames is so full of shit. That's the world that we live in.
Concerns that perhaps that won't be as anonymous as the Environment Agency is telling them.
Right, Richard, thanks very much.
Thank you, Richard.
Sorry, Richard, can I just ask you to clarify with your expert there, if your expert is still there?
Yes.
Every marine species is full of cocaine, did he say? What?
Yeah, so Alice, they're just asking about the cocaine that you've found. You're sampling these marine species and you're finding that what's in the sewage water ends up in those species.
Yeah, exactly.
How is my water provider? Well, Katie, my water provider is Severn Trent. My water provider is Severn Trent. Anybody else remember what's so specific about Severn Trent? Is that the CEO of Severn Trent sent round an email to a bunch of other water CEOs, and of course Will Hutton from the Azerba apparently, about this this idea that they had for these kind of public service companies as a way of creating a situation which would stave off nationalisation. And they said, please don't share this email, but of course it leaked anyway. So we now know that Severn Trent was trying to collude with a bunch of people to ensure that we didn't take their toys away from them as punishment for all of the shit that they've dumped on us. Literal, actual shit that they've dumped on us. So I look forward to paying my water bill this quarter. Really big fan. Big fan.
The drugs affect this wildlife in the same way that they do us. So if you give a fish a contraceptive pill, it starts to feminize. If you give crabs antidepressants, it changes their behavior because those drugs were designed to change.
They're literally, they're literally putting chemicals in the water and turning the fish gay. What's crazy as well is that I understand why they're scared about nationalisation. Like Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall was talking about this on Question Time a few months back, saying what I've been saying, which is that, well, actually, you don't need to give the shareholders full value. Because in like an exceptional circumstance like this, we already have precedent for not paying full share price. And that is in the case of Northern Rock. Remember, the shareholders for Northern Rock literally sued the government and lost for not getting their full share price because it was an exceptional circumstance. And I think that, a building society going under is a less exceptional circumstance than rivers full of shit. The literal gay frogs. Stop lying, Robert Colville told you that the reason why we are detecting more sewage is because we have better detectors. Yeah, and what would Robert Colville be? The man employed by the right-wing Centre for Policy Studies, who have the lowest rating for funding transparency. Why on earth would he want to protect the interests of the private water companies? It's an absolute mystery, isn't it?
So if you give them illegal drugs as well, it has very much the same effect it has on them that it would do on people as well.
But the fact that you're finding it in them shows there's quite a high concentration of nasty stuff coming out of that pipe.
Most certainly. And obviously it's all joined together, so these species don't get exposed to just one of these compounds, they get exposed to all of them at the same time.
And that is obviously having a worrying effect on the ecosystem here, not just around the Portsmouth area, but right the way around the British coastline.
The private water company CEOs are literally having a disco. And you won't believe this, chat. You won't believe this. You won't believe the temerity, the absolute bloody cheek, the bare-faced cheek of the water buses, as the Thames Water bus has said that we have to raise bills by 40% to be able to pay for the new infrastructure. The infrastructure that they should be paying with our bills already, except they can't do because of all the debts taken on by the vulture capitalists. And that's why the bills are going up. It's crazy. The boss of Thames Water has warned customers' bills could rise by 40% to pay for improvements. Chris Weston told the BBC the price hike was the price customers have to pay for the investment in our infrastructure that's needed. You were the ones who never invested. You gave out dividends when you should have been investing. Why are we paying? It's so brazen. It's just all of kind of the naked failures of privatization brought to bear for the world to see. Greedy CEOs paying themselves out millions in bonuses, paying shareholders out millions and millions and millions of pounds of shareholder payments, except that they sell to us, regular people living our regular lives, we have to pay for their failures. It's even worse than if they were just getting bailouts from the state. Because at least if it was like coming from general taxation, it would mostly being paid by rich people. But water bills going up 40% is essentially a poll tax on everybody. So the majority of the people who are going to have a high amount of their overall personal income going into these payments are going to be poor people. Community Secretary Michael Gove said the firm's leadership must carry the can for its shortcomings on not pass higher bills onto consumers after successive management teams failed to invest enough. Like, when Michael Gove is telling you your private sector enterprise fucked up, it's serious. You know it's serious when Michael Gove says the private sector has failed. He branded the water companies as a disgrace and claimed the firm acted in an arrogant way towards its customers. The firm is in a funding crisis after shareholders refused to give the troubled utility extra cash. I mean, it's very funny. They paid all this money out to shareholders and can't get any of it back eventually. It turns out it was a failing business model to begin with that only succeeded specifically specifically because it's a natural monopoly that should never have been privatised in the first place, which his party did, might I add. The Group, the UK's biggest water supplier, with 16 million households across London and the South East, revealed its investors pulled a £500 million funding lifeline due to be paid at the end of this month. Thames Water blamed Ofwat, claiming the regulator had made its business plan uninvestable. I mean, yeah, if you have to be regulated to the point where you actually have a functioning level of social utility and you can't make a profit because you failed to invest yourself when you've been making profit, that's your fault, mate. That's literally your fault. It is understood investors pulled the deal after Ofwat refused to bow to the water giant's demands for a 40% bill hike and easing of capital spending requirements, as well as leniency on penalties for failing to meet targets. Are we saying Thatcher did something bad? I am explicitly saying that Thatcher did something bad. Have you thought that the shareholders deserve money and we deserve poo? Think about it, they deserve the money. I mean, how could I argue with shareholder capitalism at all on this stream? How could I argue against it? True, if you're going to be listening to Keir Starmer, Thatcher dragged us out of a stupor. Absolutely. Can't argue with that. That's science. Like, no, honestly, I'm sorry. Remember when the energy companies were trying to raise all of our energy bills and we said, actually, no, we're not going to pay. There was this big Don't Pay UK campaign that millions of people kind of committed to say, well, no, we're not going to pay these ludicrously high energy bills. You know, we can't afford to. And it forced the government's hand on the energy price guarantee under Liz Truss. Just don't pay. Like, Extinction Rebellion are fundamentally running a campaign for what's called a consumer strike on paying our water bills. Like, they can't do lawsuits against like millions of people in the country all at the same time. They've got no money for investment in what's going to be capital investment on new infrastructure. They can't sue us all at the same time for not paying our bills. Just hold the government to ransom with a consumer strike. Manage these companies properly, or just nationalise them. Ideally the latter, or we'll just not pay. We'll just not pay. We're not paying for shit. We're not paying for literal shit. So I would recommend you to go follow the campaign. I'll drop it in the link in the description later on for a consumer strike on paying our water bills. The important point though, the important point here is that clearly, as I've demonstrated to you through the material interests of what happens here, the economic reality of a natural monopoly, is that this is just entirely a failure of privatisation. The directly opposing interests of social utility versus the profit motive of the shareholders who can then leverage that natural monopoly to make huge amounts of money and rip off consumers. So the solution, of course, to this is public ownership. So let's go to our favourite civil engineer of the day, Carla Denyer of the Green Party, to explain their plans.
Well, it's very, very disappointing, but sadly not surprising. I think it's another sign that regulation isn't doing enough in this sector. And that's the reason why the Greens are calling for the water companies to be brought back into public control, where we can make sure that we clean up this industry and stop the sewage spillages.
Indeed, and of course, make sure that you don't get ripped off by shareholders using infrastructure to leverage loans that they never intended to pay back and then selling it off and then running away, which would also happen if you didn't have any private equity involved in it. So good, I'm glad that there is a party that's out there. If you want to vote for a party who wants to bring our water industry back into public control, which is basically the only solution to this problem, you have the Green Party right there that you can vote for. Now, the Labour Party, they also have a plan to deal with this issue. Let's listen to Lou Haig, their Transport Secretary, talking about the idea of renationalisation of the water industry on Politics Hub with Sophie Ridge today.
Thames Water currently in crisis. There's even talk of a 40% hike in bills. Should nationalisation be on the table?
We don't have the time or, frankly, the money to be nationalising water companies right now.
First of all, I never said anything about paying full share price. I said the explicitly opposite, citing Northern Rock. And second of all, we don't have the money to be nationalising these companies. Have you considered taxing the rich? It's weird how the Greens are going to tax the rich. They say that they're going to do a wealth tax, which could raise up to £50 billion in terms of taxes on people with assets more than £10 million. And that can pay for nationalisation of the water industry. Even a full market cap rather than relying on a reduced share because of the kind of Northern Rock style precedent. You could do that. The reason why you don't have the money or there is no magic money tree is because you've chosen not to tax the rich. That's a choice that you've made and you have to tell the public. Now, we could have sorted this out by doing what you want to do, which public overwhelmingly supports, which is water nationalisation. But we don't have the money because we're choosing not to tax the rich to be able to bring that money back that we put in their pockets during COVID. £700 billion went to the rich.
because it would take far too long to unpick the very complex regulatory and privatised system that we have before we saw any impact on bills or on investment in infrastructure. That is why Steve Reed, the Shadow Environment Secretary, has been setting out plans for many months and calling on the government to be much tougher on regulation.
I mean, no. The idea that there's like an untangling process that means you can get bills down. I mean, that's just not true. That's just not true that something would be a huge barrier to nationalisation. Especially if it was on a large scale immediately. You're just essentially taking over the infrastructure whilst leaving essentially the private companies with the bag of all the debt that they've accrued. Especially if you're, taking the infrastructure itself rather than like the actual operations of the individual companies themselves. Because the infrastructure is what's important here, not, the actual brand names of all of the different regional water companies. And even then, you said, well, we will be a long time until we saw an impact on bills. The state could be investing in new infrastructure now. They could be investing in new infrastructure now on the understanding that they were then going to buy these things back, and they won't do it. And again, that would be fairer for us because there is a larger proportion of that coming from the rich in terms of general taxation than it would be if it was all just going on bills, whereas poor people are paying the same extra that rich people are paying.
It is the Tories' regulatory system that has allowed companies like Thames Water to get into huge amounts of debt whilst not investing in the infrastructure that we need and illegally dumping sewage in our rivers and lakes. That's why we've set out plans to put proper sanctions on water bosses that do this, and indeed...
It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Again, this is about material interest. This is about the material relationship and the conflict between societal utility and the profit motive. You can't just tinker around the edges with this. It's fundamentally a failure of the entire structure of privatisation. And their entire plan for this, their entire plan is just, we will have a stronger regulator and we will sanction bosses. Right, even if you didn't want to pay for nationalisation at market cap, or even less than market cap using Northern Rock as a precedent, one thing that you could be doing is instead of issuing fines in cash, which is what we do currently, there's unlimited fines, but these are always built into the profit and loss projections for these water companies. It's built into their business model that they will just continually getting sanctioned by the state and paying out all of these fines and then making a profit anyway, because it's all built into the model and they can put bills up regardless. What you do instead is you fine them with shares. And then if they keep dumping water with sewage in it, if they keep failing in terms of investing in infrastructure, they'll be state-owned eventually, depending on how strong you are in terms of how many shares you take off them. Another plan that they could do. Let's be clear who the shareholders are: foreign investors, far from the original Thatcherite dream advertised on our TVs back in the 80s. Oh yeah, the share ownership democracy, it never was going to happen, was it, Zach? You're absolutely right. It's all just foreign private equity companies. The biggest thing I get in response when I talk about Northern Rock and things like that is people going, oh, what about all of the pension funds in the UK? First of all, it's mostly foreign investors rather than pension funds, so whatever, I don't really care. But even then, pension funds getting involved in this horrendous industry, it's your own fault, mate. It's your own fault. I'm sorry, mate. Maybe divest from industries that are pumping shit into our water, and maybe you won't have a risky investment. It's as simple as that. Yeah, your value of investment may go up or down. Very true, Jim speak. Especially after we already bailed out the pension funds with emergency quantitative easing during the Liz Truss debacle. Index-linked pensions have been lost a few times now, so pension investment into national companies would improve security. I mean, what you could do is you could promise the pension funds when you nationalised at below share price. You could promise the pension funds a percentage ownership of the new state-owned water delivery enterprise. If you created a national water delivery enterprise that was 70% state-owned and 30% pension fund-owned, similar to what Reform UK are promising, that would be a way of cooling the pension funds, but also telling foreign private investment companies to go and fuck themselves. I think I could get on board with that. See what I mean? Warning to ministers over privatised water kept secret since 2002. Author calls for disclosure of his report that shows why private equity dominance in England has proved so disastrous. Ministers were warned about the dangers of private equity taking over the water industry in a briefing that's been kept secret for 20 years. Details of the analysis are still being withheld as sewage pollution and the failure of water companies to invest in infrastructure under national scrutiny. Crazy, isn't it? That anybody who knows how the mechanical nature of a natural monopoly works could have told you that for free. And yet it's it's this big scandal that they've kept it secret that private ownership of natural monopolies was always going to fail. Oh no, what a surprise. Crazy shit.
For people who aren't in the weeds of this story, Chris, just explain, if you could please, what is exactly that your shareholders want from Ofwat?
Well, at its simplest, they want a business case that they can invest in that gives them a reasonable return. And our shareholders have not received a dividend since 2017. And under the current business plan that we are discussing with Ofwat, they're not likely to receive one before 2030. So I think that demonstrates a lot of patience. So as they look at that plan and work out whether it is investable, one of the key criteria for them will be that it gives them equity returns that are appropriate for the investment.
So when would that be by then, before 2030?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but there will be a business case that runs from 2025 to 2030, and they will work out what the cash flows look like from that business case that will go beyond 2030, and in the round they will look at it to see if it provides the returns that they require.
It's being widely reported that your shareholders also want the ability to raise bills quite sharply. What is the truth of that?
Yes, I understand that, and the process that we are going through...
True. Finally, somebody is thinking about the shareholders. Yeah, it does make me sick. It makes me sick like someone swimming in a river full of sewage.
With Ofwat, allows Ofwat to assess the asks that we have made for capital investment in that 5-year period. So investing in infrastructure that helps us to continue to provide water, and also the investment we need to protect the environment. And once that business case is landed, that is what then determines the impact on customers' bills. So if you like, it is an iterative process that we work through with the regulator that then determines what those bills look like. And we, as the operator of the company, we want to get to a business case that is in the best interests of customers. It is affordable for them, but it is also financeable for Thames Water and investable for our shareholders. And that, I think, is an absolutely fundamental requirement, given the levels of investment that we, and indeed the whole water industry, are looking for in that 2025 to 2030 period.
It's been widely reported that you're seeking bill increases of up to 40%. Is that a number you recognise?
So I don't think we have been at all secretive about that. The plans that we have put forward, which are very much in accordance with what customers are asking us to do, require an investment of around £20 billion in that 2025 to 2030 period. And that would result in a bill rise of around 40%. And
almost like you should have been doing that already. It's almost like you should have been making those investments for the entirety of the period in which you've owned Thames Water up until now. Why did you not make any investments? Or suddenly, there's a lot of news stories about all of the sewage we've been dumping. I guess we'll do some investments, but your bills have to go up. You should have been doing that already. You don't have to wait until it becomes newsworthy for you to do your fucking job. Like, I'm sorry, this is ridiculous. In exactly the same way is that it shouldn't take an ITV2 documentary for our government to recognise the problems of the sub-postmasters. And there's been some funny shit coming out about that. I say funny in a less in a ha-ha funny sort of way in the last couple of days, where essentially recordings came out that everybody knew at the time that Fujitsu software could be changed remotely, and they just covered that shit up.
We recognise that at this current moment in time, that could be very, very difficult for people. So at the same time, we are looking at what we can do to protect those that are most vulnerable and can't afford that type of increase. And so we have a tariff that supports those people. There are currently about 320,000 customers on that tariff. And in the next 5-year period, we would expect that number to go up to nearly 500,000 customers being supported through that special tariff.
You've made very clear there that bills need to rise to fund new investment, but that is not how most people are going to see it, is it? They will say, this is a business that's been badly run in the past, and that bill payers are going to be paying for the mistakes made by previous management.
I mean, I'm not going to comment on what has happened in the past. I'm new into this business, and I am just focused on what we need to do going forward. And it is very clear, listening to our customers, that what they...
I mean, I get that he's not been in the job very long, but at the end of the day, you can't just ask customers to pay up for it. Honestly, it just needs to get nationalised. It's the only solution. It's the only thing that works here, is just to nationalise it. I'm sorry, there's nothing else.
They value most is high quality, clean drinking water, and that we do all that we can to protect the environment. And those two things are primarily what is driving the investment that we are having to make in our network in that 5-year period. And we have to recognise that as we do that, we are dealing with climate change. I mean, we've seen in February a record fall in rain, and it was beyond anything that we have seen since records began. And our network is not designed to cope with that level of rainfall. And also population growth, seeing a huge increase in demand between now and 2050. So as well as...
Should have been investing. Where are the reservoirs? How many reservoirs have Thames Water built in the last 20 years? Let's have a look. Let's have a little quick Google, shall we? If you find out how many reservoirs Thames Water have built over the last 20 years. This article from 2022 says no new reservoirs since 1992. What a fucking Kel fucking surprise! Kel fucking surprise, chat! In 30 years we've built fuck all. Because of course the private sector had no incentive to invest. What a surprise.
We're dealing with a changing climate and a population growth, and all of that drives the investment.
Yeah, the changing climate of people finally fucking holding you to account for being shit at your job.
That we absolutely have to do to bring our network up to current standards and in line with expectation of our customers.
I hear what you're saying, Chris, and no one is blaming you personally. You only joined the business in January. But nonetheless, there have been more than £7 billion worth of dividends extracted from this business over the last couple of decades. Surely more of that money could have been put towards future-proofing the business and making it more resilient to cope with the kind of events that you've just described.
And I can understand why there would be that sentiment out there. But I think we also have to recognise the important role that equity providers, shareholders play in providing capital to invest in this network.
No investment! There's been no investment at all! You've been privately owned for 40 years and they've done nothing! I'm losing my fucking mind, chat! I'm having an actual breakdown right in front of you on stream for him to come on here and say, well, the real heroes of all of this, the shareholders providing the capital investment in fucking what? What have you invested any capital in at all in decades? I just, these fucking people. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.